radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
Good evening. Wow, Fade to Black. Historic day. Today is Wednesday, July 26th, 2023. I'm Jimmy Church, and what a day it has been. I have broadcast 4 shows today live. This is my 5th show. Yes, I have been up since 6 a.m. It's now 7 p.m. I've got Fade to Black to do, and then I've got to be up in about 5 hours to catch a plane. So that's my day. And you know what? Sleep is for sissies. And I just posted up in the chat that I'm a little ripe at the moment, and it's times like these on the air when I'm gonna have to try to catch some words that come out of my mouth and try to get them back in. But it's going to be one of those nights tonight. And welcome everybody. Crazy day, and of course I'm talking about the UFO hearing with the Congress and the House Oversight Committee this morning. That kicked off at 7 a.m. and we broadcast the entire thing today, myself and Christina Gomez, and we just watched things unfold. It was crazy. It was crazy. And somebody just asked me in the chat, what's my honest take? I'm still processing it. Jordan Ziff, everybody knows Jordan, great guitar player. And I was out today picking up my ducks, actually, for this weekend. And he calls, dude. And I said, yeah, right. And what do you, and it's like that. And I've been fielding the phone calls and the text all day today. It was pretty dramatic and pretty crazy. I'm still unpacking it. It's just nuts. It's just nuts. Okay. Now, let's get tonight started. Help support our show and our hard work like today, doing all of these shows live. We've got a huge team around us. Help support us. And it's easy to do. Just get a Fade to Black T-shirt. You can do it one of two ways. And the links are below. You can just order a shirt or you can get a Game Changer membership. And it really helps what we do here. Okay? We work really, really hard. Tonight, our guest is Jim Willis, and we will be talking about, amongst other things, our hidden history, ancient aliens, and the suppressed origins of civilization, all that and much more. He's a theologian, a historian, and a musician. He earned his bachelor's degree from Eastman School of Music and his master's degree from Andover Newton Theological School. An ordained minister for over 40 years. He served as an adjunct college professor and guest lecturer in comparative religion, cross-cultural studies, and contemporary spirituality. His background led to his writing 20 books on religion, the apocalypse, spirituality, and arcane and buried culture, specializing in research, bridging lost civilization, suppressed history, and the study of earth energy, dowsing, and out-of-body experiences. His link to jimwillis.net is below and over on social media. I would like to welcome for the first time to Fade to Black, Father Jim Willis.
Thank you, Jimmy. I didn't see the whole thing, but I just spent the last half hour watching highlights of the conference this morning. Whew. Wow,
Man,
I'll tell
man,
you, it's been recorded, so when we finish, I'll probably be still so jacked up. I'll probably have to watch the whole thing on recording, but
yeah,
at least I've seen the highlights of it.
okay, before we get started, and it's riveting.
Yeah.
It's what you do, but we have the first time guest disclaimer to get out of the way. You're a first time guest, so it's this, Jim. It's just you and I sitting on my couch having a conversation as friends, and where that
Right.
conversation starts, it starts. Where it ends. But we're going to end as friends, just like sweet tea on your front porch with the coyotes howling at night. And
Oh, you're talking to a Southerner here down in South Carolina, so I know all about coyotes and sweet tea.
that's right. That's right. Love it. I love it. Yeah. Here, I realize that it's impossible for everybody to have watched the hearing live as it went down. Pretty exciting.
Yeah.
I'm looking at various numbers around the internet of people that are just now catching up to it and going back because they're hearing and they're reading about what went down today. And so and if you haven't seen it, go back. Yes, it is 2.5 hours, maybe 2 hours, 45 minutes of pretty riveting stuff. The opposite of what we have come to expect from Washington, D.C. and intelligence agencies and so forth when it comes to the UFO subject. It's just amazing. Now, I kind of want to start here, though. With your religious background in the books and teaching and what you do, theologian, all that stuff, does looking at the universe in a scientific way, going back to the Big Bang and our origins, does it go against the grain of what is taught in seminary school?
You asked the question that a lot of people ask, and you asked it correctly. Does it go against the grain of what you were taught? And the answer is yes, it does. It goes against what you were taught. Does it go against spirituality? No, I don't think so at all. There is this, I don't understand this idea. And I see it especially in Christianity because, I mean, I was a pastor for 40 years. I stood up in front of a congregation and led worship services and did all this stuff and everything else. And I am absolutely amazed at something that I could never quite figure out. We would stand up and sing together at Christmas. Angels from the realms of glory, wing your flight o'er all the earth, or hark the herald angels sing. And we would be singing these songs about entities, we would call them angels, who stepped out of another dimension, heaven, into our reality and produced, music, which is vibration, with a kind of a message. And the message was always the same. There's more. There's something else out there. It's different. And we would sing that with such conviction. And then you say, do you believe in UFOs or do you believe there's aliens out there anywhere, even either in our universe or in a different dimension? And Christians say, oh, no, we can't do that. That's wrong. We read the story about Jesus going up on a mountaintop and with his disciples, Peter, James, and John. And while he's up there, we call it the Mount of Transfiguration. While he's up there, out of the ether, out of this other dimension, step Moses and Elijah. Now, Moses and Elijah have been dead for centuries by this time, but they both died suspicious deaths. Moses, we are told, went up into the desert, into the wilderness, and there he died, and his body was buried up there by God. And yet in the book of Jude, we then read that in the New Testament, we read that while they were up there, there was some kind of a weird thing going on that Michael, the archangel, was in charge of the body of Moses, and he had to fight the devil over the body, and he won, and he was victorious. That's a kind of a suspicious death, right? And we read about Elijah, who supposedly mounted up to heaven in a fiery chariot. And we read that story, and we read it very, with great, solemnity and everything else. And then say, no, we don't believe in people from other dimensions, or we don't believe in life after death, or we don't believe in this kind of thing. Well, then why do we sing about it? Why do we read about it? Why do we teach it? The current state of religion today, most of it is just so metaphorical. We treat these things, we just refuse to say that maybe something happened in the past. Maybe something happened. Maybe there were flying saucers described in the Old Testament. It certainly seems like that. When you read the story of Elijah, when you read the story of Ezekiel, and when you read the story about Isaiah, who was taken up. Even the Apostle Paul had an out-of-body experience. He said he was not permitted to tell what he saw when he was there.
He had a few out of bodies, Paul.
Yeah, he did. And he even says it. He says, I was taken to heaven, whether in the body or out of the body, I don't know. God knows, I don't know. But I just do not understand this contemporary idea in religion that wants to celebrate these things and talk about them as if they were great miracles, but deny them in our day. I don't get it. I just don't get it.
Can't you? Now, I hear people talk about this today, but when I was a kid, I decide. When I say kid, I was 21 and 2021, and I decide to just read the Bible. Right. So I do. And I take a month, pound it, right, flip it over, start again, page 1, Genesis, right, and read through it again. And as I was reading through it, I was reading it as a novel. I didn't want to read it like a religious teaching, or I wanted to extrapolate something and be, come to Jesus moment. But I just wanted to understand it because what was written, because so many people quote from it and act like experts. Well, I wanted to be able to participate in those conversations. And so, but I got about halfway through the second reading, and I'm like, this is Arthur C. Clarke.
Yeah.
Right? This is science fiction. If we start to exchange words here, and then once I had this realization, I started to interpret it all a completely different way.
Yeah.
And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. But people talk about it more today. But that's what happened to me when I was 21, and I've never looked back.
Yeah, and it was Arthur C. Clarke who said that any technology sufficiently advanced is going to appear like magic, and it certainly does. I wrote a book a couple of years ago called Censoring God, about the books that were not included in the Bible. We don't quite... Ministers know this, but they just don't tell their congregation that. The Bible was not written as a religious text as much as it was written as a political text. You go back to the 4th century, and Constantine wanted to pull together his whole empire. I mean, he had an empire that went all the way from the British Isles into the Near East. And he had to pull it all together, and he needed some kind of structure that would work. And he decided to use religion. Christianity up to that point was considered to be a cult. In the early years, it was a cult embedded in Judaism. And then when they broke free and Gentiles began to join, but it was a far-flung idea. I mean, there were the Gnostics in Egypt, and there was the Egyptian, there was a whole idea about what was going on in Turkey at the time, in Anatolia then, modern-day Turkey. It was all different. And so when they brought the books of the Bible together, they did it with a political implication. What they wanted to do was create a document that would cement religion, cement Christianity, and tie it inexorably to the Roman Empire. In other words, they wanted a document that would say that would tell these people basically what happens here is you got to get in line and stay in line, or you're going to hell. And the only way to stay in line is to just take the doctrine, take it what we do. If you have any questions, you don't go to God. You don't have a spiritual experience. Instead you go to your local bishop, and they will interpret it and everything else. And basically it all went back to Constantine. And so there was a great rule of law. It was a political document that said this is it. And if books were written that didn't agree with that idea, if there were free spirits in Gnosticism, for instance, they said destroy those texts. And so they did. And if we hadn't discovered the Nag Hammadi texts, for instance, in Egypt, we'd never know that they were written. If we hadn't found the Dead Sea Scrolls, we wouldn't know about this rich tradition of a totally different way of interpreting the Bible. And so when you ask that original question, is this is what taught in seminary, I can honestly say, no, it's not taught, but that doesn't mean it's not there. It just means that it's not taught. Because so often in religion, what we do is continue this whole Roman idea about trying to cement power at the top. And that's a political way of operating, just like you might say that it was the same as what we saw in the hearings this morning. These people, 3 very learned men, were saying that this knowledge is known, it's just not getting out to the people. We're not telling you. And that's the same thing that happened in the 4th century. There were many different ways of understanding spirituality and understanding the original experience of the founders, for instance, the ones who wrote the original text. But power has a tendency to cement itself by keeping things secret, by not telling. And we usually generally say things like, oh, the people couldn't handle it. I've never bought that. I don't understand it. I don't understand the whole idea of Project Blue Book. I never did. Why we had to keep that thing so quiet and not tell people because they couldn't handle it. No, that isn't it. I think there's a great freedom. I think people would have we might even solve a lot of the problems of war if we realized, hey, wait a minute, we're on this little planet. And maybe there's all kinds of things going on around us that we don't understand. Maybe we get together and solve our problems. Maybe that would be a good idea.
Yeah, maybe we should behave now. The party's over.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot. What would be worse? You find out that, the fact, that's it. We are all there is in the universe.
Yeah.
Or we find out that we're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
And if we find out that if we are all there is, Jim, there's no reason to behave.
Yeah.
No, man, you party. You burn this sucker down. Let's just you know what I mean? Let's run this thing till the wheels fall off. You find out that there is a reason to preserve this planet and preserve humanity and get our seat at the table in the universe and make friends and with our ET brothers and sisters out there. There's a reason to realize that we are earthlings, that we are not separated by religions or false borders, that are drawn on maps and things like that, that we are just of one of the earth. And I think that we need to make that step in evolution for sure.
Yeah. And isn't it strange that on one hand, the government says we have no idea that there's anybody out there. As far as we know, we're all by ourselves. And yet the first time we can send a satellite up that will reach out past our own local neighborhood, what do? We put in Carl Sagan's famous golden record. We say, here we are. This is what we look like. This is what we sound like. This is what we do. And so how on the one hand can we say we think we're all alone, and on the other hand put out this big welcome mat that says, here we are. Is anybody else out there? I don't get it. I don't get it.
What did you make of, you're watching the highlights today, watching the faces of some of the representatives in Congress with these revelations? Yeah, okay, you're a religious scholar, but you're a pastor. And my last name is Church, so I've got a little pass card. Watching the faces when Grush, it said, okay, so what's the deal? Do we have flying saucers? I'm paraphrasing. And he goes, yes, we do.
Yeah.
Where are they? Do you have the addresses? I do. Can we have them? You can. It's like, whoa. Do we have, what about biologics, right? And non-human intelligences, as Grush likes to call them. He says, yeah, we got those too. It's like, what is going on? And the look on their faces, we're talking about sworn testimony on Capitol Hill. You're not, I just don't feel it in my bones that you're going to go up there under those circumstances with this kind of information, swear an oath, and give this testimony and just tell these, and just lie and make that kind of stuff up live on television. I'm not sure that that's the case. And I think that that committee was stunned. What do you make of that? And as a theologian and a religious scholar, what do you make of that? And we'll get to 6,000 years in a second.
Okay. Yeah. When you start to think about religion in general, we have moved so far away from the original inspiration that hit the founders of the religion. Moses went out was out working in the wilderness out there, fleeing for his life from Egypt. And the story is said that God came to him through the burning bush. Jesus, the story is said, spent 40 days and 40 nights out in the wilderness. Again, and it's that metaphorical number 40, out in the wilderness, where he confronted the devil and then came back and preached his first sermon, where he said, blessed are the meek, blessed are the merciful, and all that kind of thing. Muhammad prayed and went out into a cave and prayed until finally the angel Gabriel appeared to him and said, write. And the result was the Quran. Siddhartha, who became the Buddha, went out and sat underneath the bo tree and said, I will not leave until I reach enlightenment or die. And there he was confronted by Mara, the devil of Buddhism. All these people had an original experience, which I can only define as a shamanic experience. Shamanism was probably the very first religion, as it were. Somebody had an insight. Somebody saw beyond. Somebody saw something more, something other, and came back with that insight after that shamanic experience. That's exactly what shamans still do to this day. Their idea is to go out of body, obtain information, bring it back for the good of the people that they're working with. And they had this great experience, and then their followers came along and started building fences around it, and dogma and doctrine and everything else. And that's where religions come from. So when people say, is there a difference between religion and spirituality? I say, yeah. Spiritual people can be religious, but I know a lot of religious people who are not spiritual at all. Many of these founders, if they were to come back and look and see what people had done to their original shamanic vision and how they had built all these hedges and fences around it, and tried to use it as a power play to keep people in line and keep people in order, I think they'd say, no, guys, you got it wrong. That's not what I meant at all.
Well, and to have biologics, as they're calling it, non-human intelligences, to have the pilots of these craft in our possession, what does that say to the world? Do we freak out, or is it just like the universe is a big place? Of course, there's life out there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's crazy. Just in the last couple of months, we've opened up the whole idea of time in the cosmos. Uh, a year ago, 2 years ago, we were saying the universe is 13.8 billion years old, and in that time, that's an immense time span. So yeah, sure, life could have arisen. Now, within the last couple of weeks, even it's coming out that the universe may be twice that old, and maybe we've even looked beyond. Maybe we've even seen what some things that happen outside of our own universe. That's an immense time frame. Now, if science is going to say that life emerges out, biology emerges out of non-life, well, if it happened here, it can certainly happen everywhere else. And if we don't want to say that maybe it didn't emerge at all, maybe there's something behind it, then all we have to do is take some words that are come to us out of quantum physics and exchange them for words that we're familiar with in the Bible. For instance, instead of God, talk about consciousness. Instead of the power of the Holy Spirit, talk about quantum forces, which we don't even really fully understand. And all of a sudden, we realize that the people who wrote these original texts, and not just Christianity, but in Judaism and in Islam, Hindu texts are full of all kinds of fantastic stuff that if we read them as they were probably originally meant to be read, we see that these people were seeing something beyond. And we've, in a great extent, lost that today, which is why I was so glad that this conference was held this morning, because it opens the whole thing up for the first time. And so people can start to say, whoa, there's something out there. The old way of getting this information out would have been that somebody had to write a paper and it had to be peer reviewed, and then it had to be published in a journal someplace that nobody ever read, and it wouldn't get out. But now, thanks to television and thanks to shows like yours, all of a sudden we can start to do an end run around this stuff and say, wait a minute, no, it's different than we had thought all along.
Well, and you bring up a really valid point about technology and where we are today with the discovery of not only the ginormity of the universe, but what these numbers represent. Mm-hmm. Because if we just strip everything away in its simplest form, and it's such a complex issue. You have the expansion of the universe at the outer edges of the observable universe. It's expanding beyond the speed of light, and stuff is dropping off the cliff, and we'll never, ever see those galaxies. We never will. They're just gone. Yeah. And so the general size of things and the ages of things, we don't know. Now we have the James Webb, which has the capabilities of looking farther back into time than ever before. And we are getting answers to questions we haven't even asked yet. And we're trying to figure this out. And the numbers keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, when just 20 years ago, it was a different world.
Oh,
we didn't have any exoplanets 20 years ago. No. Right? Now today, every star's got an exoplanet, and there are trillions of stars in each galaxy, and that means there are trillions and trillions of planets in each one of those, and there are trillions and trillions of those out there. The numbers are
unbelievable. Yeah. And even 15, 20 years ago, like you said, we were stuck with a certain brand of physics. And we had to answer questions like, how could there possibly be UFOs here in the Earth? Because how could they have possibly got here? It would have taken so long, traveling at the speed of light from Alpha Centauri. It would have taken how many years, and all this kind of stuff.
What was that? What was that sound? Is that you? Are you bumping something on your desk?
Oh, probably I'm bumping. I get excited. I'm probably bumping my microphone. I'll try to watch.
If that's coming from in here, God is telling us to tone it down.
Oh, I'm just well, yeah. But what I was going to say, we had Newtonian physics, but then 100 years ago, when all of a sudden the quantum world opened up, now we're opening up whole kinds of new ideas. The idea of entanglement, for instance, if particles can be entangled on both sides of the universe. So instantly one moves and the other to the right and the other one spins to the left. If that idea is right for quantum physics, and it's been proven over and over again that it is, then it opens up others' ideas that maybe we don't have to consider moving through space with just Newtonian physics. Maybe there are ways to travel not at the speed of light, but at the speed of thought. Maybe if entanglement is real, we might be coming up with opening up all new vistas to where intelligent life can come to Earth. The idea of wormholes and the idea of black holes, and now the whole idea that maybe the universe never had a beginning at all. The James Webb Telescope and it seems to be hitting some people who in the past swore that they were Big Bang theorists from the beginning. I'm thinking of people like Michio Kaku and what's his name?
Neil deGrasse Tyson,
yeah,
Brian,
Neil deGrasse Tyson, and all the rest of them. And now they were all saying just in the last couple of years, ever since, well, in the last couple of months, even really, for one thing, they're coming out and saying we had it all wrong. Now, when you start to think about a universe that doesn't have a beginning, then there may have been a Big Bang, but now we can start talking about before the Big Bang because we're thinking there may have been something there. Once you start talking about words like eternity, never a beginning, never an end. And you put that together with other words like consciousness, which may not just originate in our minds, but may pervade not only our universe, but the multiverse. And all of a sudden, you begin to find a scientific explanation for something that these early religious writers saw, but didn't have the vocabulary to describe. God is eternal. God is omniscient. God is everywhere. Well, that's how they interpreted it because they didn't have the understanding of what consciousness was, for instance. Boy, you try to get your mind around eternity? Woo!
Right. Yeah,
that'll keep you up nights.
It's two things at the same time that never end, backwards and forwards. Right.
Yeah. I love that. I'm going to remember that.
Yeah,
that may wind up in a book someplace. You'll have to watch it, Jimmy. I may steal it.
It's all yours. It's all yours. But I would like to say that you're preaching to the choir right now, but that's a metaphor that you hear too often. But we discuss these things nearly every single night on this show because if it's like logic comes into play here. We're getting a little bit smarter every day. We're not as smart as we think we are, but we're getting smarter every day. And we start to think about simple things like time started 13.8 billion years ago. Before that, there's no time. It's like, no, there had to have been something before that. That we can't, this universe isn't all there is because space is big, like forever, right? And forever is a long ways away. So I think that's the way we're starting to look at things today, Jim.
You mentioned Neil deGrasse Tyson, for instance. He used to drive me crazy in some ways. I have such respect for him as a scientist and as a cosmologist and astrophysicist. And on the other hand, he kept in the past, at least, talking about getting over talking about religion. And I can't talk science with Neil deGrasse Tyson, but darn it, he can't talk religion with me either. When he starts coming onto my turf and saying that science is going to explain it. And so I used to be very on the fence about listening to him. Sometimes he would drive me crazy. Now, of course, I always respected him. But now, just in the last couple of weeks, I've started to see interviews with him when he's changing his tune completely.
Yeah, he's tapped out. He's tapped out. He's on the mat.
Yeah.
He's hitting the mat. But there are a few out there that are about to get a huge dose of reality handed to them.
Yeah.
And I understand, Jim. I do. I understand you only know what's around you and you only know what you're taught. I get that. And so when we look back at Enrico Fermi, the Fermi paradox. He's one of the brightest modern minds, like in the history of everything, right? But he was with us. He's a modern. And even then, in 1952, at Los Alamos National Laboratory, when he stood up and said, "Okay, the universe is a big place, but where is everybody?" And that became the Fermi paradox, as we all know. Well, it's because he was still although a great thinker, and the atomic age and all of that, it was still Newtonian physics. It was still mechanical craft, traveling across and faster than light travel. The Einstein-Rosen bridge, these were just ideas. So, would Fermi today have the same way of thinking? He would not. And Neil deGrasse Tyson and others like him are going to have to tap out and start to change their tune. It's just that's all it is. Science is a big string of corrections, isn't it?
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for Michio Kaku when he said on one interview after when that first information started coming back from the pictures from the James Webb Space Telescope about seeing those first 6 galaxies, which were within 300 million years or something like that at the beginning. And I have great respect for a man like that, string theorist and everything else. And he was able to say, they've upset the apple cart. We may have to rewrite the books. And since he wrote some of those books, that was a wonderful thing for him to say. But I don't know. We have a terrible way of treating people. Let me just think of a couple of ideas. For instance, here in America, for instance, we have in terms of archaeology, the whole idea of Clovis first took over, and everybody who if you didn't go along with Clovis first, you were ostracized. You couldn't get any money. You couldn't teach. You couldn't do any projects, and you were just put out the window. And now all of a sudden, with places like just downstream from me a little ways, the Topper site is finding evidence of stuff that not 20,000 years ago, like Clovis first said, but now we're talking 50, 60,000 years ago. And then over in California, now we're going back 125,000.
San Diego,
and these people were simply ostracized. You think about people, for instance, Hugh Everett. When they were derided and laughed at, Hugh Everett, his idea of the many worlds theory is probably as important as Einstein's theory of relativity, as far as I'm concerned. But Everett died a tragic death after years of being blackballed because nobody could understand the idea multiverse, splitting off, the idea of making a measurement or making a decision and splitting off into other universes. Hugh Everett couldn't even work in physics, one of the most brilliant physics guys who ever lived. And of course, it probably turned out well because he had to get a job with the government. And he was the one who had the whole idea of mutually assured destruction, which may have got us through the Cold War times. I don't know.
Well, today he's like one of the most quoted guys today, though.
Yeah. If he had lived another 20 years, he would have died thinking that maybe, he was a success. He died thinking he was a total failure. What we do in this country, and we do it so often around the world, I guess, if you disagree with a guy's ideas, instead of arguing the ideas, you start to attack his character. What Feynman was once called an idiot by what was his name? I can't.
Was it Bohr?
Yeah, it may have been Niels Bohr. Called Feynman an idiot, and he didn't just do it to his, while they were sitting around talking like you and I are. He did it at a scientific conference.
Yeah, that's right.
How do you treat people like that? I mean, and that's what we do, and it's just and take the conference that we saw this morning, the hearing that we saw this morning. I'm sure you and I are both old enough to remember when you started talking about UFOs in public, you were not just disagreed with. No, you were ridiculed. Oh, come on. How could you be so stupid? Neil deGrasse Tyson even used to do that. Bring me some evidence, he said. Show me something more than a fuzzy picture on a camera, something like that. Unless we start treating each other with respect and treating the material with respect, we're never going to get anywhere, which was why I think that hearing was so important today.
If we look at the ideas that you've just laid out, and because of that, today we have some problems, and let me get this point out. The dogma behind Egyptology and Mesopotamia and Sumer, and that number, right, 3000 BC. Before 3000 BC, nothing. There's no conversation. Everything is after 3000 BC. Giza Plateau, Sumerian text, Mesopotamia. That's the conversation. And just to your point, the historians of the world, the educated of the world said, look, if you bring us something before 3000 BC, we can have a conversation. But right now, that number is 3000 BC. That's it. There's nothing to see here. Now we have Göbekli Tepe.
And even more, Karahan Tepe, even older than that. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. And we're not a couple of weeks older, but 7 millennia at least. And that tips everything over, right? But that's not good enough.
When I was the first time I visited the Great Pyramid in Egypt, you can't go down into the Great Pyramid without a guide. They don't let you do that. So we had a small group of us, and we were going down underneath the Great Pyramid, and we were walking down, and I was getting a little bit claustrophobic. I mean, it gets narrower and narrower. And I noticed these wires that were along the ground, next to this wooden walkway that we were all walking on. And I noticed the wires, and the purpose for the wires was to power the electric lights that were tripped to go off ahead of us, and then they would turn off behind us, and all this kind of thing. And as I was trying to get over my claustrophobia a little bit and saying, well, I better be thinking about something else, I found myself saying, how did these work down here without electricity? Boy, it would have been hard. So I started looking up on the walls and on the ceiling, and there was no soot. There was no idea of fire or anything like that. And so I was at the front of our group. And so I said to our Egyptologist guide, I said, how did they work down here when they didn't have any electricity like this? And he turned away from me, kept walking forward, and said, oh, they must have had some kind of power source. What?
Yeah, exactly.
What power? I mean,
exactly.
You're talking, you're talking about a whole different technology, and they wouldn't even acknowledge it. And they came up with all these crazy ideas about, well, they probably had mirrors set up that came in. Come on.
I just got back from Egypt. Oh, I say just got back. It was in October, and I'm going back in a couple of months. And we had our little group. We had the entire Giza Plateau to ourselves, and no guides. I had my personal security, right? That was it. And we had everything. So we were running in and literally out of the Great Pyramid from like 5 in the afternoon, because before that we were down at the Sphinx. But by the time we got up to the Great Pyramid, it was about 5 in the evening until midnight. Just in and out, up and down by ourselves.
Oh man.
We lost people. We had to go, okay, somebody's got to go back in and go find Bob, because Bob's not on the bus, and back into the pyramid.
Oh man.
Yelling and looking for people. But I was able to, you bring up such a great point, because I did what you did. And once you get inside of, and this is where Egyptologists, they've stuck to the dogma. That's all. Mm-hmm. That's all. It's a tourism thing. It's a dollar thing. And I get that. I understand it. But once somebody like you or me gets to go and explore and look around, you step back and you just ask yourself, how? I mean, how? The why part, that's another question, and we can visit that.
Yeah.
But because it's not just the Great Pyramid. We're talking about hundreds of sites around Egypt.
Yeah,
it's everywhere you look, and those are just the ones that we know about, right?
Yeah. And then 6,000 years, 10,000 years before that, you're talking Karahan Tepe, where, according to what we're taught, a bunch of hunter-gatherers, small bands of hunter-gatherers, got up one morning and they said, let's start hauling megaton boulders all the way across the landscape.
Let's carve these. Let's carve these perfect.
Yeah.
Let's engineer. Well, let me ask you about that. I think that's a really great. This is where we combine religion and space and ET into this.
Yeah.
Because to go from a hunter-gatherer, right, wearing animal skins, maybe buck naked, right? And you go from that to building a megalithic site like Göbekli Tepe. You don't do that without being taught.
Yeah.
So was it entanglement from the stars? Was it God? What, or was it Atlanteans? I don't know. But somebody is teaching somebody, right? Where does the knowledge come from?
There's the ideas. There are not many ways you can all of a sudden get there. You are either taught it, or you are taught it. It's just about by who. I mean, you don't just get up and make those kinds of changes that quickly. So of course there's ideas. Now we're into the field of ancient gods, basically. These people they always have the same idea that somehow the gods brought this to us. So who were the ancient gods? Did they come from outside our own planet? Were there ancient aliens who brought down this material and who brought down this knowledge? And if so, why? Was there, I mean, now we're getting to Graham Hancock's territory, but was there a civilization that was very advanced during the time of the last ice age? Archaeologists and anthropologists say no, but well, why not? And that brings us into the whole idea of Atlantis. And, is Atlantis founded in an historical thing, or is it just a metaphor? Well, more and more we begin to get the idea that perhaps the Atlantis story is a telling of something that actually happened, like so much of our mythology is. Were there advanced people on Earth, or were there advanced people that came to Earth, like we read about the Anunnaki and everything else, who brought this knowledge and taught those people in Anatolia? I don't know. Nobody knows for sure. But if we aren't willing to ask the question, then we're never going to be able to discover. We're never going to be able to search it out. And so many times in schools, I know in seminary we got this. I'm sure it goes on in universities as well, where archaeologists will say to their students, "Don't touch this. Don't look at it. Let it go. Let it be. Let those questions just ride." It's a shame. It shouldn't happen. When the archaeological site, the Topper site, was right downstream from me, when Al Goodyear, who was leading up that great dig, when he got down to the Clovis layer, he wanted to go deeper because he saw in Pennsylvania, in the Yucatan, down in Peru, there were sites in Oklahoma and Texas that seemed to be much older than Clovis. And Al Goodyear was a Clovis first guy. And he had to tell his students, he gathered his students together and he says, "I'm going to go deeper. I want to go deeper. But if I got to warn you, if you stick with this project and we find something, I could be killing your career. You got a decision to make.
We're going to get defunded." And it's one of the greatest archaeological stories out there. They were right. And it wasn't just him.
No.
This was going on across the United States. There were
Yes.
a few different sites where things were getting older and older, and it was Clovis first. And if we go beyond that, it's over. We have to stop the dig. We cannot prove something here.
And it was that way for Clovis first lasted for what, 70 years at least.
70 years. Yeah,
Yeah.
probably.
Before it started to fall apart. And we call that science? Come on, that's not science.
And I think today, I used to say this a lot, that the United States, I'm talking about North America, we can throw Canada in the mix. There's another country up there to the north. The band Rush is from there, by the way, and Wayne Gretzky. It's a country north of us. But that we are fine. We were like we ignored North America. We paid all this attention to Egypt and all this attention to Greece and Rome and certainly the United Kingdom and I get that. Even China, for example, we paid a lot of attention there, and we ignored North America. And I think that we're finding out that there were lots of things rotated through here for a long time, just like the rest of the world.
Which is really strange too, because there's a rich mythology found in Native American stories across the country, involving everything from visitors from the stars to ancient histories that go way back. There was all kinds of stories about that. It's funny because I just came back from a trip where I was looking at mound cultures between here and the Mississippi, and I traveled on the Trail of Tears for a while, and I did some dowsing at trying to determine energies at places like Cahokia and Monk's Mound and all those kinds of places. I visited a lot of different mounds and found all kinds of interesting energy going on. And the reason I was going in this particular direction was because my house is built on, well, it used to be called a ley line. Now they're calling it energy lines, that I found because I didn't do any dowsing when I first came here, and I didn't know anything about it. So within the last 15, 20 years is when I've started to discover these. And I discovered this ley line that comes right through our place, runs right up through the Elberton Monument that is now no more. It's been blown up, all the way through Monk's Mound at Cahokia. This same line, I measure it with my dowsing rods, 88.5 inches long across, and everything else. And there's so much of this rich kind of history. The Serpent Mound in Ohio has such history to it. And yet we just ignored it. You hit it right on the button when you said if it couldn't have happened, it's not supposed to be here, so we're just not going to pay any attention. And now all of a sudden, boom, thanks to people like Graham Hancock, people are all of a sudden starting to say, wait a minute, let's do something about this. And again, I think a lot of it is due to the technology. People can now take their ideas out to the public without having to go through all of that rigmarole of the passing muster with a certain group of people who have their own power agenda about not wanting to share what they know and all that kind of thing. I call it the conspiracy of silence.
It is the conspiracy of silence.
Yeah.
What is it doesn't matter which Christian faith we're talking about. Okay, it doesn't matter. But how are they going to handle disclosure? There's got to be a religious spin on this to preserve what they've built. How are they going to deal with this?
Not very well, I don't think. People ask me, have you lost your religion? Because I have all these ideas and talk about it and write them, all these ideas and books and stuff like that. Have you lost your faith? And no, it's expanded. If anything, It's bigger than it ever was. I don't look at Christianity historically anymore. I'm looking at it metaphorically. I don't even care if there was ever an historical Jesus. It's not gonna change my idea. It's still my home. I'm just interpreting it in different ways. So when people say, if I get interested in reading your books and what you're saying and this kind of thing, if I read your book on quantum akashic field and how to for the astral traveler and all this kind of thing, does that mean I have to leave my religion? And I say, no, go into it deeper. You don't have to. Religion, Joe Campbell was great about this. He talked about spirituality being the hardware of the computer, and all these different religions are different software programs, and every one of them will work if you use it right. The problem is they don't talk to each other. You can't use this. It doesn't jibe with the other software that somebody else is using. But if you stick with it, you can find all kinds of depth in Hinduism, in Buddhism, in Christianity, in Judaism, in Islam. You can find all kinds of things there if you just open up and are willing to look at these things with new eyes, with metaphorical heart, and you can find all kinds of truth there.
Well, I like the way that you use the metaphor of consciousness and God.
Yeah.
Because in this is a point that I bring up a lot on this show, but I'm just going to say it once again. In Brian Greene's latest book, because physicists aren't allowed to talk about consciousness.
No,
it's a no-go zone, right? That's the red line. That's the red line. But in his new book, he covers about 100 trillion years of time. From the beginning to the end. Well, he starts at 10 billion or 10 billion years.
Yeah.
13.8 billion being where we are at. Okay. Yeah. So but the point is he gets to the last chapter and 100 trillion years in the future. And I was stunned. He says everything has come apart. Particles have lost their energy. There's no more weak or strong forces. That's it. Everything dissolves. There's nothing left. There's no more helium, no more hydrogen, no more energy, no more stars, no more light, no more anything. Everything is just gone, right? He says the only thing left is thought.
Oh.
And I sit up. I'm in bed, right? I'm reading this. Did he just write that? So I read it over again. I've read these pages so many times now. And he says all that's going to be left is thought and thinking, and going around, and you'll see a stray particle going through the vastness of the blackness out there, and the thinking thought is going to go gobble it up. It still needs a little bit of energy to keep going. And I'm like, are you talking about consciousness, Brian?
Yeah.
Is that what you're laying out here? And if time is forever, right? And you're talking about 100 trillion years. Well, what if we lump that 100 trillion years before? And that thought is this cloud of thought. Is that consciousness?
Yeah.
Is that his way of bending the rules a little bit? And is that the God that is referred to in metaphor?
Take a look at the book of Genesis and substitute the word consciousness for God. In the beginning, consciousness created the heavens and the earth. Now, we're told in quantum physics that you cannot have material manifestation unless there is an observer. We're taught that light, for instance, is both a particle and a wave, and it doesn't become one and the other unless there's an observer to observe it. In the beginning, consciousness created the heaven and the earth. How did he do it? Consciousness said, "Let there be light." Consciousness observed, and the material universe came into it. And consciousness said, "It is good." Consciousness is the observer. Consciousness creates humankind in our image with that biocentrism, right? And all you have to do is substitute those words, and all of a sudden these old texts take on brand new meaning.
Is the most spiritual person in the world that atheist physicist when the plane is going down? You know what I mean? And
Interesting.
yeah, I don't say it in a cavalier way
Uh-huh.
because I think that they get it. They do. They just don't. They can't say it out loud.
Yeah, and in a way, I mean, I used to be much harder on them, I suppose, than I am now. In a way, I can understand where they're coming from because, as we said earlier, of the doctrines and dogmas of these religions. These people have probably had bad experiences with them. I have, for instance, a hard time using the word God right now in public because I know what I mean when I say God, but I don't. But, somebody else is going to say God, and they're immediately going to be thinking, "I remember the God that I had to deal with when I was in 5th grade Sunday school or something like that," and so they react against it. So whenever you start to talk in terms of any kind of religious context, people probably have a lot of baggage with it. And I've got a sneaking suspicion that a lot of these people who have just rejected religion outright and had nothing to do with it probably are doing so because of some of that baggage, the bad experience. So I kind of feel sorry for them in that way, and I kind of emphasize with them in that way. But that doesn't take away from the fact that the religion that they experienced was not the essence of spirituality as it comes down through religion. They experienced something that was wrong, and it probably scarred them up for life.
I had Tom DeLonge on the show. He's only done a couple of interviews, right? I had him on the show back in, I don't even remember the year, 2016 or something.
Yeah.
And 2000, it was probably 2016. And he said this, and it stuck with me. Whatever you want to think about Tom DeLonge, but he said that in Washington, and more specifically inside of the Pentagon, there are those there that know that there is a religious component to ET and to UFOs, and this is their belief system, and I really think that those words from Tom are more significant than we realize, because if we're in possession of craft and bodies, we understand a lot about ET. It hasn't been communicated to us yet, the public, but we understand a lot. And could it be that there is a consciousness aspect to all of this?
Yeah.
And that's what one of the things we could learn from ET, and in these days of disclosure, is that like one of the big reveals. It may not be as complicated as we think, right?
Yeah, I agree. If consciousness is God, or if God is what we now would probably refer to as consciousness, and if consciousness is the observer in the quantum world, then consciousness has the attributes of what we've always attributed to God, for instance, eternity and every place else, which means that what we used to call God, we now call consciousness, is not just the God of this world, the God of the multiverse. The consciousness is everywhere. Consciousness is the glue. Consciousness is the creator. Consciousness is the sustainer. And that gives us a whole new idea about what we're here for.
Well, and wouldn't ET understand this, right? If they're right, if they are just a little bit more advanced than us, it could be a billion years, it could be 500 years, whatever.
Could be even more than that. Yeah, I mean,
it could be more than that, and they would have a grip, right? They would have a firm understanding of what it is all about, and we're just now getting there.
Yeah, which makes me wonder if sometimes, when in terms of the Fermi paradox, where is everybody? I sometimes feel that they don't want to contact us right now. We're not ready. They're waiting. We're in this big zoo down here, and they're saying, "You're either going to make it or break it, guys. If you make it, great. Welcome to the Federation of Planets."
Right.
If you don't make it, why should we let you pollute what we have? That kind of thing. That's why I really believe we are at a crossroads right now. Every civilization, I've written a lot about ancient civilizations, and every civilization has had its moment in the sun, and then gone. Why should we be any different? And I think we're either going to be the next lost civilization, or we're going to be the future of a brand new future for humanity that we can't imagine. And I think we're pretty close to being right there on the edge right now. And frankly, I'm a bit terrified. I'm just think about what we're talking about, the possibility of nukes being used in Ukraine, Russia using nukes there. We're talking about global catastrophe in terms of weather. We're talking about economic systems that are just really being manipulated right and left. We're talking about technologies that we have the knowledge to use, but we don't have the wisdom to control them. And so that's why I think we're in a very precarious position right now. We've come to the crossroads. What way are we going to go?
Well, you know what's weird about that? And you're right. But we've had these moments of terror, of being scared before. Mm-hmm. We had it in the Cuban Missile Crisis. We had it in World War II. Mm-hmm. We had it. The Romans had this discussion when Egypt was invaded by the Hittites and saw chariots in the wheel for the first time. Yeah. That was pretty frightening. That was end of the world stuff right there. And so I think that we will work through it. I do. I just I'm not worried about that. What I think is, and we need to take a break here in just a second, but I think that this moment in time, and you're right, we're at a crossroads, that we're going to look back, from the future. We're going to look back at 2023, 2024 as another renaissance. And I think that's where we are right now.
I hope so. I must admit, living out here in the woods the way I do, and not seeing people for days on end, or not hearing any human noise for a long time, and then I turn on the television, and I'm shocked by what I see, because it's so different than my experience. And so that probably tends to make me a little bit more negative. I have to really watch that. And
I never watch the news. You know what put re-cemented my faith in humanity was Egypt. And it wasn't the megalithic structures. It was the people. The people of Egypt, because we have this preconceived third world idea. It's like this first world problem of what the third world is like, because of what we're taught with images and shown with images on television and the news. And you go to Egypt now, it's crowded. It's old. It's all of that. It's busy, but everybody's happy, right? Everybody's smiling. And people know how to respect each other. And that's funny, because I had exactly the opposite thing in Egypt. I've heard that from a few people.
Yeah, in my situation, for instance, we once had to go and rescue a couple of women who were with our group, who were across the street, and who weren't. They were by themselves, and they weren't wearing the right clothes. And a group of local Egyptian toughs decided to give them a hard time. We had to go and surround them and get them out of there. And I began to think, what's going on here? I mean, how can they treat people like this? So I had just the opposite feeling, but I'm sure both of us are correct. Both of us had a different experience, but it was a real experience, I'm sure.
I just remember one of my thoughts as I'm flying back to the United States, and first world problems, right? Okay, so I'm in my bed in first class, right? Eating my 7th meal on a 13-hour flight, right? And thinking to myself, I love my country, I do, but sucks.
Yeah.
Right, where this negativity is everywhere, and I knew that I was flying back into the maelstrom, and I wasn't too cool on that. I really had a great experience in Egypt. You know where I got messed up, of all places, where I got jacked around? Jordan.
Really?
Yeah. So I had this backpack of stuff, trinkets that I had bought, right? And they were all in this backpack. And I didn't have checked luggage. I just had my carry-on, right? So I'm self-contained. And I'm changing planes in Jordan, flying back to the United States. And so I'm going through, and I go through customs, and I zag around, and there is a couple of ladies there from the airline, and they're there to grab me. I'm in seat 1A, right? And they're like, Mr. Church, we're boarding the plane now. And I said, okay, cool. We'll escort you back. And as we round the corner, there's like 3 cops in uniform, like fatigues.
Yeah.
Come here. I was like, what? And all of a sudden, nobody is speaking English. And they take me down, they take me around, down these stairs and into this room, and tell me to sit down. And my plane is boarding. And I'm not happy. I know I haven't done anything. And sit down. I said, no, what are you doing? Now they don't, and they take all of my stuff out. They're photographing my passport with all of these things, statues, whatever. And they're taking longer and longer. I'm looking, I'm like, man, my flight takes off in like 5 minutes, takes off. And I'm in the belly of this airport in security. I don't even know where I'm at. I'm confused. It was the gnarliest, Jordan of all places. And finally the general, right? This dude comes down, he's got the gold and the things, and he comes in, looks around. Now he speaks English. And he looks down, he looks at everything, and he goes, you can go. Really? So I pack up my stuff. They don't do it. I put everything back in my backpack. They open up the door and close it behind me. I'm in an airport hallway somewhere. I don't even know where I'm going. And that was a strange experience to go through. Like I was right on the edge of like being thrown into Antiquities Jordan jail over ancient trinkets.
Oh man, that's something. I had an experience over there when I was coming. I came into Egypt from Israel. I'd spent a week or 10 days in Israel first, and we hit the checkpoint at the Sinai, and there's barbed wire all wrong, and all of a sudden our bus is stopped. And nobody knows why. And we're there for an hour. We're there for 2 hours. Buses keep coming, and they're all stopped, and they're all together. And finally, after about 2 or 3 hours, we had a convoy of buses. There must have been 15 or 20 of them now. And we all go across the Sinai together. And every time we stopped, the people, the soldiers came out and established a perimeter around us, keep us safe, and all this kind of stuff. We didn't know what was going on until we got to Egypt, and we checked into a hotel over there where we were going to be staying for a while. And lo and behold, we discovered that there had been an attack on on a Japanese tourist bus down in Luxor. And so they were wondering whether we had to come right back, or whether the State Department in America was going to close off everything and we had to fly back right away, or what. Turns out that Osama bin Laden a young Osama bin Laden had attacked this Japanese tourist bus. We didn't find that out. We were the only people in the world who didn't know about this attack. They didn't tell us, So here we were stuck down there. It turned out well though, because there was a woman in our group whose daughter was taught English to Egyptians in Cairo. And we had a chance to meet her because we were stuck in the hotel for a couple of days. So we had a chance to meet her and talk to her and get to know her. And about a year later, my first book, Journey Home, had come out. And the woman whose daughter was the English teacher had bought 10 copies of it to give it to all of her friends. And I visited her about a year after the trip. And she lives in Washington, D.C. And she said, my daughter is back in the country, and she's in Washington, D.C. with a bunch of her friends, all of whom I've given copies of your book. Do you want to go see her? And I said, oh, yeah, sure. So we went in and found this Washington water hole. And sure enough, there was this young woman who I had met over there. And I had a writer's opportunity that I've never, greatest thing for a writer. I could walk up to this woman in front of all of these other women who had read my book, and I could say, I haven't seen you since Cairo. I felt, oh, what a great moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Jim, stay right there. We've got to take our quick break. Let's get that in. This is Fade to Black. I'm Jimmy Church. Stay with us. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black. Please visit all of our sponsors. We're taking a quick break here. All of the links are below. We'll be right back. Join us November 10th, 11th, and 12th, 2023 as Disclosure Fest Foundation and Fade to Black Radio presents Stairway to the Stars, a Human Origins Science and Technology Expo, live at the Luxor Hotel and Casino on the Las Vegas Strip. With live talks, lectures, and workshops by world-acclaimed researchers and authors. This is Jimmy Church, by the way, and I'll be your host all weekend long, featuring topics like human origins, ancient technologies, indigenous teachings, workshops, a mass meditation, yoga and sound healing, music, and so much more. Don't miss our intimate sky watch and meteor shower over the infamous Area 51 airspace in Rachel, Nevada, with special surprise celebrity hosts guiding us through the night. Also introducing our Disclosure Fest VR Starship area with dozens of rides. You've got to check it out. This event will sell out. For more information and tickets, please visit disclosurefest.org. Hi, everybody. Jimmy Church here. Very special announcement, and that is we are shipping Fade to Black T-shirts again. It's been almost 2 years. We did a full upgrade to the website, so you can head over to jimmychurchradio.com. It's all simple to do, and it's right there. Remember, we broadcast 4 nights a week, Monday through Thursday. We bring you the best, the brightest, the most knowledgeable and amazing guests, the best conversations. We do that 4 nights a week. We also do 4 days a week. We broadcast the news, and we do that live too as well. It's not a one-man show. I do it with website support. I do it with producers. I do it with writers and artists. All contribute to the show. The best way to help support what we do here is with the Fade to Black T-shirt. And you can get your Fade to Black T-shirt one of 2 ways. First, go to jimmychurchradio.com, order a shirt. It's really that simple. You're going to get a tracking number, it's going to get shipped, and it's going to get autographed. The second way to get a shirt is with a Game Changer membership. Now, the Game Changer membership not only includes a free T-shirt, but you get a private email to me. You get unlimited commercial-free downloads. You have full access to the website, and everything includes free shipping, and everything is autographed. So help support the show. Get your Fade to Black T-shirt today. The links are below. You can just go to jimmychurchradio.com, and it's right on the website. So there you go. I'm Jimmy Church, Fade to Black. I'm so excited that I just have one thing to say. Go Beckley Teppy.
Hey everybody, it's Billy Carson, also known as Forbidden Knowledge. I want to talk to you about a very special event coming up July 30th, 2023, the Forbidden Conscious Awards. We're going to honor people who have been contributing to the conscious community for decades. People that you know and love that have helped you get to higher levels of thought and consciousness and awareness. It's going to be a live in-person event, but seats are going to sell out very fast. You want to make sure you're there in person, and guess what? You can help vote for the winners. Voting is available on forbiddenknowledge.com, and the categories are going to be social media influencer, podcast/radio host, TV host, actor, director, producer, entrepreneurs, health and wellness, philanthropists, authors, field researchers, archaeologists, space anomaly hunters, and of course, a Lifetime Achievement Award. I'll be your keynote speaker that night at the Forbidden Conscious Awards. We have celebrity guests performing. We'll have a halftime show where we're actually going to perform music for you. And don't forget about the pre-event mixer, where if you buy a box seat, you'll be in the VIP section, and you also have private access to a VIP mixer with celebrity guests. Shake hands, break bread, network, and then walk the red carpet with us and take amazing photos. It's going to be a night to remember. You don't want to forget this. Make sure you hurry up and get your tickets because they're selling out very fast. I want to see you there. Forbidden Conscious Awards 2023.
River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. My own mic. All right, we're back to church. Our guest tonight, Jim Willis, and we're talking about the origins of us and ancient aliens and contact, and of course the connections with the Bible, but also a deep conversation into physics and science. And getting back to it, Jim, you said earlier one of the key points in all of this discussion, which is modern physics is trying to convince us that if we look at something, we can change it, right? all you got to do is look at it, and you can change a particle's behavior. You can change a particle, and the double slit experiment says exactly that. Well, how can you say that and then not have a conversation about consciousness? You can talk about entanglement, but you can't talk about consciousness and spirituality. It seems a little bit hypocritical to me, or a lot hypocritical.
Yeah, I think it even gets more complicated than that. We've been talking about everything from ancient aliens right up to the present. But let's ask the question, first of all, are we real? Modern physics is starting to say we may be an illusion. We may be just the pixels on some kind of a supercomputer screen acting out our whole thing. Or in terms of ancient, can you use the word ancient if some scientists are beginning to say that time doesn't even exist? It's just an illusion. Is our life just an illusion? Are we there? And so you get all these. You use the word hypocritical, and I think, yeah, it's so much more complicated now than it used to be. It used to be so much easier, but now you can't even talk about any of these things without getting into all these questions. And consciousness, the whole idea of a manifestation. You go to YouTube and look out things about manifestation. I mean, if you imagine it and if you picture it and you can follow the rules and you get it, and every lot of what used to be called New Age people say, yeah, I kind of manifest this in my life and manifest that in my life. Is that any different than these Christian TV hucksters who say, send us some money and God will bless you with more money, plant some seed and that's how to get more money and all this kind of stuff. There's a lot of hypocrisy out there.
Is it any different than trying to convince us about entanglement?
Yeah.
I would say that it's the very same thing. Yeah. Our physicists hucksters, right? You can't. It's really weird to me, where I'm seeing it, I'm hearing it, I'm understanding it, but I hang out in the spiritual community, and which I love, and understanding these concepts, and then you go and you visit these different countries, and you see what's going on and what history is, and it just seems like we're all talking from the same page.
Yeah.
We're all speaking the same things here.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe from that we can, when we start talking about hypocrisy and what we're being told and everything else, maybe from that we can deduce that in some ways, the religious infrastructure, different religions, are really no different than any other field. The physicists, do they have denominations? Where are there groups of physicists who say this is what we believe, and if you want to join our group, you got to believe with the way we believe it, and our way or the highway? I know you find it in academia because I was a college teacher, and I know that there are groups in there, and and the same thing in economics and politics. Certainly, I mean, our political structure today is so divided that I find myself saying, is this just the way humans act toward anything? You can take any field, any any way you want to look at it and call it whatever field you want to look at, and it gets divided up into groups that say my way or the highway, and it leads to hypocrisy, I think, and I don't know what to do about it.
Yeah, and the more you push facts onto somebody thinking that you're going to change an opinion, it actually cements their belief system. How did you come out of it? How did you come around?
Well, it wasn't easy, I'll tell you. When I went into ministry, and I was in seminary back in early 70s, I had the idea that I get out of seminary and I'd have my degree and I would be ordained and I would join this spiritual group, a church someplace, and we would be this spiritual family that had the idea that we would grow together and grow spiritually and all this kind of stuff. I learned quickly it doesn't work that way. Churches aren't that way at all. When you become a pastor of a church, you're kind of a CEO of a small corporation, and you're involved with whatever, all the things that you got to do. It's busy. You got to work about the next church service, the next meeting, the next teaching thing. You got to worry about keeping this person happy and that person happy and all the rest of the stuff. And you're teaching always about God, but you just don't have time to have a deep spiritual life. So when I retired, I took early retirement at age 62, and I left to come out here to live in the woods in South Carolina. Excuse me. And I left with an agenda. I said, I want to go out and I want to wrestle with God. I want to experience. I just don't want to know about. I want to experience. I figured if God can speak to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, God can talk to me, that kind of thing. And I came out here with a prayer, really, in my mind and on my lips. It was the prayer, a verse taken from the Old Testament when Jacob and Esau were split. The two brothers were split, and Jacob had to kind of flee for his life up into Anatolia. And then when he came back later, and he was about to be reconciled with his brother Esau, he was on one side of the river with his family, and Esau was on the other, and Jacob had no idea what was going to happen the next day. And so he was doing what we all do when we're worried at night. He was up walking back and forth, pacing back and forth. And the Bible says a strange thing. A man appeared to him, it said, and they wrestled all night long. And finally, Jacob had the idea, I'm wrestling with God. And he said, as the dawn began to break in the east, he said, I will not let you go until you bless me. And that verse was on my mind. I was coming back here to the woods, and I was going to go on retreat. My plan was to stay for a year. It's been closer to 16 now, but and that was on my mind. I will not let you go until you bless me. There was a crazy sequel to this story. A couple of years ago, I was over in Cornwall a group over there had asked me to go over and give a talk about the roots, the shamanic roots of world religions. And while I was in England, I had to go to this little town called Fenny Compton because my ancestors used to preach in this little stone church in Fenny Compton up northeast of England. They were clergy in the Church of England. And I was able to go there, and I met the historian in the town, and she took me in, and I was able to stand in the pulpit where my ancestor used to actually preach. And I would look up from that pulpit, and there was a stained glass window that was the same one that was there when he was there. And it was a picture of Jacob wrestling with God, saying, "I will not let you go until you bless me." Somehow he passed his spiritual DNA down to me, and that verse was the one that I had in my mind when I came out here to the woods. And when you ask, how did you break out of that rut you were in, that's what really did it, wrestling with God. My prayer was answered. It wasn't answered through Christianity. I don't think it would have meant anything to me if it had that. It came to me instead.
You manifested it.
Well, yeah, there you go.
You
No,
manifested it.
it came to me through the world's oldest religion, through shamanism, and I discovered dowsing, and I discovered all these different ideas and new ways of looking at life, and new ways of looking at God, and new ways of looking at purpose and meaning in life, and all that kind of stuff. And I don't think you can do that unless you were able to be fortunate like me and actually get away and spend time alone and quiet and slow down. Oh man, life today is so busy, and it's so active, and it's so noisy that people don't have time to really get in touch because they can't hear their inward voice speaking. And you learn after a while that the divine is not out there, it's in here. And to find that, you've got to quiet down and hear that small voice speaking within you. And that's very difficult to do nowadays.
Have you ever seen a UFO?
Never have. And I've often thought that if I was out here in the woods sometime and flying saucer came down and a little green man from Amazon said, "Come along," man, I'd jump and I'd go with him in a minute. I really would, but I never have.
You never have. I've got this weird vision. All right. And it goes something like this. I'm going to give you the short version. The classic pop culture mythology, right? The flying saucer on the White House lawn, right? So let's say that happens. And it's live on CNN. It's live streaming on Facebook. And the stairs come down, and here comes E.T., right? Steps off, and it's Jesus. Now, but there's a reason for that. Not that E.T. is Jesus, but if E.T., of which there are probably billions of species that know about this planet, right? It's a crazy amount. But that they would have time to study us.
Yeah.
And they would want to shapeshift, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't come off in an image that would freak us out.
Yeah. Now that changes my answer to your question. You said, have I ever seen a UFO? When you said that, I made the mistake of jumping right into the old nuts and bolts, lights and all that kind of stuff. When you talked about your vision, and in a way, I guess I have to have a say, maybe I have, because I've had a lot of out-of-body experiences. And in those out-of-body experiences, I have seen entities which I know are very real. And I just never considered them UFOs because they weren't flying. But I contacted them, and we had conversations together. And I find it very difficult to explain them because they live on the other side of a barrier that our language can only talk about stuff you see on this side. I can't say this is what I saw. I can say what I saw looked like this. So I guess in that sense, yeah, I probably have seen entities from other dimensions. And I just never thought of them in those terms. That's all.
How did you get to give me the short version, because I have other questions about this
Okay.
that I want to squeeze in. But what do you mean out of body?
Well,
Ayahuasca, plant medicines, or do you have another way of doing it?
no, I've never used chemicals or synthetics, or I've never used even natural plants. Never even smoked a cigarette. So I've never used that. I'm not against it, because I think those can open your mind. With me, I was very taken by the teachings of William Buhlman, who's probably one of the foremost teachers of out-of-body experience and how to have one. And he was absolutely convinced that if you spend in deep meditation, I use hemisync music too, invented by Robert Monroe at the Monroe Institute, and I did spend a week up there studying with Bill Buhlman. He was absolutely convinced that if you take 30 minutes a day and meditate for 30 days, 30 minutes a day, that something was going to happen. And I took him at his word. If I had stopped at day 28, I never would have had an out-of-body experience. But once I had my first one, and I write a lot about this in my book, Quantum Akashic Field, which is kind of a how-to, how to go about having out-of-body experiences. When I had my first one, it took me by surprise, like it does everybody else. And since then, I've been able to teach other people, and they've had the same experience. But you really can. We talk about out of body. Do you really leave your body? I don't know. Or whether, I mean, I've had the experience of actually seeing my body from outside. So I take it that I do leave the body, or is it just a matter of entanglement somehow? I just really don't know. I just finished a book that's going to be coming out next year called Near-Death Experience, about near-death experiences. And a lot of that is the same kind of thing. I've talked to hundreds of people who have died and then come back, and talked about seeing people in a different dimension, and talked about the feelings they had of love and compassion and perfect acceptance. Most of them didn't want to come back. And I've had out-of-body experiences where I really didn't want to come back. But I knew I had to. I knew my work somehow wasn't done. And I'm pretty convinced that a lot of the UFO feeling, a lot of the UFO stories we hear about people being abducted or whatever are really not just simply abducted into a nuts and bolts spaceship someplace, although I think it's absolutely possible. But I think a lot of it may have to do with this whole idea of connecting with a different dimension, connecting with a different reality.
It's an experience, not necessarily something purely physical. And it's probably a lot of both going on.
I think so.
What were the conversations with these entities about?
Teachings, mostly. I would receive a block of information, and I thought this was unique to me. You have conversation about meaning and purpose, and the information doesn't come to you sentence by sentence, word by word. It comes in a block of teaching, something you just all of a sudden understand. And I could never really explain this until I started talking to other people who have had the same kind of experiences. And they all mentioned the fact that, this teaching comes as a teaching block, but that's pure shamanism. I mean, the idea of shamanism was to go there and receive a message that you come back that had purpose and had meaning. And a lot of it was insight into, why am I here? What is my life about? What am I supposed to be doing? What is the purpose behind it all? And it had so much depth to life.
What did you learn from that? What was the takeaway?
Oh boy, like I say, I wrote a whole book about it. So we'll have to get together and talk about quantum Akashic field sometime. But basically, I came up with an idea of what we're here. I call it a slice of reality. Picture a circle spinning around, say, and there's a still point in the middle of a circle where there is perfect peace, perfect oneness, perfect unity. I call it the source. And then, or say it's a piece of pie, and you're going to cut yourself a piece of pie, starting from the circle, and you have this wedge, this slice of reality that goes out to the edge. In perfect unity and in perfect peace, consciousness, really, a lot of it, there at the source, there is something that you can't understand and you can't experience, and that's individuality. How can there be individuality where there's perfect peace, perfect unity, perfect oneness? In order to experience individuality and made the source grow by understanding the experience of individuality, you got to make a courageous decision. And I've come to the conclusion that we've all made that decision. That decision involves leaving the source and moving outward. When we do, we enter into the first dimension that I like to call consciousness. Albert Einstein and Stephen Hawking referred to it as the mind of God. You're not individual yet, but you're conscious of the fact that an individuality can exist. You begin to know that there is such a thing as individuality outside the source, and you begin to grasp the idea of what it's about. And you move out of that dimension of consciousness. You move out of that into the first field that you have to cross. And that's the field that I like to call the Akashic field. It's a Sanskrit word. You enter into that Akashic field, and that's a field of potentiality. Everything that's possible, everything that's potential is found there in the Akashic field. And when you move through that field, you enter a second dimension that I call quantum reality. That's the idea of thoughts and intentions. You don't yet know where you're going and what's going to happen. And you don't know what you're going to be. You're not a person yet, but you know what a person is. Plato talked about this when he talked about the idea of horse and horseness. Plato said a horse is a manifestation of what he called horseness. A horse doesn't exist in quantum reality, but horseness does. And when a horse goes through and when horseness is translated into horse, then it takes on reality. It takes on a physical manifestation. That's quantum reality. That's the place where thoughts and intuitions really abide. And it's the field that was just recently discovered. We've begun to probe that field with mathematics right now. We know that quantum reality is real. It's one of the most proven ideas of science. But in order to get from quantum reality into our world, you got to go through another field, and that's the Higgs field, the recently discovered Higgs field. In quantum reality, there is only energy, there's only potential. But when energy moves through the Higgs field, it slows down, so to speak. Here in this country, we talk about it. We describe it as a field of like molasses. In England, they call it treacle. But through the Higgs field, energy becomes mass, becomes material. Einstein gave us the equation for it. E equals mc squared. Energy and mass are the same thing. And when you pass through that Higgs field, you enter into this, what I like to call material reality manifested. It's our perception realm. Now, all of a sudden, we are individuals and we have ego. I don't think ego is either bad or good. It's what we do with it. And most of the time we take ego and it kind of inflates it, because as soon as you become an individual and separate from one another, separate from the source, separate from God, you have that idea of I. You never had that back in the source. I have this, I have that. And out there in material reality manifested in our perception realm, we have a job to do. That's what we came here for. And that's to experience individuality. And then to take that experience of individuality back to the source after we die. We talk about the Akashic record, where everything happens out here on the rim In our perception, reality is recorded, or the Christians talk about the book of life and everything, where all your deeds are recorded. And the idea is that we come out here for this short time. We have purpose and meaning because we are out here in a place where the Buddha talked about poles of opposites, good and evil. You can't have one without the other. And we're out here to experience both of them and then to take back that experience to the source. So in that sense, the source is with us and in us. In that sense, yeah, if the source is God, then yeah, we are all gods within us. Jesus said in the New Testament, "Know ye not that ye are gods?" And we're out here to experience that, which I find a great deal of comfort in this, because when things are really bad, when things are going with a great deal of difficulty, I know that in a way I chose to go through it. I chose to experience it, and it will have a greater good because it won't last forever. And when I die and return to the source, I will have somehow made the source just a little bigger because I've experienced something that is unique and different. This is a much too quick. It's not nearly deep enough. I could take an hour to just talk about this, but this is what I've received from out-of-body experiences. The idea that life has purpose and meaning, and we are out here for that reason.
But conscious, if we talk about how does the energy find the physical, right? So you've got a sperm and an egg, and boom, and you got, and at some point you were you.
Mm-hmm.
But when does that occur? I understand that consciousness, it is my belief, it's not what Michio Kaku is going to tell you, but I believe that consciousness exists outside of the physical. I don't think it's a chemical creation.
Yeah, I agree.
Science is going to have a different position on that. That's fine. None of us really know. But if that is the case and consciousness exists outside, when do you become you?
I think you become you when consciousness takes on a physical manifestation, as when it goes through the Higgs field, when the energy inherent in consciousness passes through the Higgs field into this material world. We become us, and it may happen again and again. I certainly think that there's great possibilities that we live many lifetimes experiencing something different each time. In Hinduism, 6,000 years ago, they call it the wheel of samsara, and eventually you fulfill your destiny and you leave the wheel, you step off the wheel of samsara. But I think we are a physical manifestation of consciousness, in that we are the first, we are able to actually consider ourselves and observe ourselves. Consciousness observing itself in a physical form. It really, I don't know where else to go with it because I know time is short.
Yeah, totally. The other idea here that is created, and I love the ideas behind the Akashic records and the Akashic realm, but I have this, when I have it explained to me, I keep picturing individual souls collectively just flying around, swimming upstream, right, if you will. And because the idea of it all being one, then how do we reduce it back down to becoming an individual? That's the part that I'm confused. So if you're living lives, multiple lives, then we have independent souls, right, that are just hanging out in the ether, in another realm. I have a hard time understanding.
I don't blame you. And I think the reason is we're using language to try to describe something that is really far beyond language. And that's what I learned in out-of-body experiences. You learn things, and while you're there, while you're out there talking to these entities who, in Christianity, they call them guardian angels, or in other cultures, they might be spirit guides. when you're talking to them and they give you that block of teaching, you understand. And then when you come back and try to explain what you understand, you run into troubles because language just doesn't do it. But you know that there is understanding out there. You can't really explain it. And I've spent now 15 years trying to find better ways to say it. And I hopefully I improve on every book. In every book that I write, I'm getting a little closer to the truth. But language really falls short, and our human intellect really falls short. I think it's something farther, much bigger than us. And we are simply a chip off the consciousness energy. And when we return, we take that experience back with us, and consciousness expands. It's observing all the time.
When somebody channels, and there's some really good channelers out there, and I'm fascinated with that. Darryl Anka and Bachelor is a really good example. And so when we observe something like that go down, there is that connection.
Yeah.
It's you said it earlier, right? The speed of thought. And that must be what is going on. And then you go back and you just take a couple ganders at the Bible, and it seems to be saying the same thing.
Yeah. I would read all these books that claim to be channeled, and I frankly was a little skeptical. But I had something happen to me. I'm in the process of writing a book right now. The original title was Sabuko and Me, but my latest book is called Cosmo and Me by the publisher, so I can't use Sabuko and Me. So right now we're toying around with a title that's something like a minister and a shaman and a spirit guide walk into a bar. But at any rate, whatever the title of the book is going to be. But it was to be written really by two people, by me and by my own particular spirit guide, who I called Sabuko. And I noticed something really strange when I looked at the manuscript. When I was writing as Sabuko, I didn't think I was channeling or anything, but I noticed I never used a contraction, which is not me at all. I never used a contraction, and also I had very few editorial mistakes. I mean, mostly it was just my own typing or something like that. And now that I look at it and those chapters, I'm really convinced that I was channeling Sabuko, my spirit guide. My parts, that talked about me, I contractions all over the place, and there were all kinds of editorial mistakes. Now, I didn't know this until after I was over doing the proofreading. How did that happen? I don't know. I don't even know if I certainly didn't agree with, or didn't believe necessarily in channeling before, but there it is. There it was.
So you have a co-author.
Yeah. I hope he doesn't want half the advance money. I don't know.
But when you experience, Jane Roberts was just absolutely amazing. And you see this transformation, and that's not with every channeler, but the good ones, I believe that there is something going on. They have the ability, and I think that we probably have it. All of us have it in our DNA. We just haven't tapped into it.
Yeah, I think so. And it's true in other fields too. I mean, look at Mozart. How could he write symphonies like he did at age 12 and 13?
Yeah,
he had to. Yeah, Jimi Hendrix. They have to be channeling. We talk about the muse, as a musician, I mean, I've had this happen. Any musician has, I'm sure, where some nights, I was playing, for instance, one night I was playing with a jazz group with a quintet that was just absolutely locked together rhythmically and harmonically. And we knew what was happening, and it was just, we weren't thinking, it was just coming through. And man, we finished one set that was just particularly inspired. And I looked over at the sax player next to me and whoa. I said, that's better than anything. And the sax player looked at me. He had the same look in his eye. He was feeling it too. And he said, man, that's better than sex. Except that his microphone was still live and his wife was sitting in the front row. So she heard it. But, I mean, it happens. A writer, all of a sudden, people say, where do you get your ideas? Sometimes they just come, you're connected to that potential that's found in the Akashic field. You talk about, a lot of scientists are beginning to say that the world consists of information. And that's what comes to us. And it comes to us through this process, through the consciousness and the Akashic field and quantum reality and the Higgs field out here to the rim where we live in material reality manifested in our perception realm. And it comes out and it explodes. And there's a Mozart or there's a Bach or a Beethoven or a writer or a poet or a musician or somebody. Where else does it come from? Who knows? John Williams. How are you going to describe where he gets all of his stuff? You know what I mean?
Da Vinci.
Yeah.
It just seems like we hear it all the time about going into the zone. Mm-hmm. Right. And getting there. And there's so many different examples of this with indigenous cultures.
Oh, yes.
Joseph Campbell, right? I mean, it's when we look at these examples, you go to the mountain, a boy, and you come down a man, and you go on the spirit journey, you go on the hero's journey. You're going into the zone and you come back a hero and learred. We hear about that over and over again. I think there's something.
Good athletes say the same thing. They say, I'm not thinking. It just comes, and you visualize it. And all of a sudden, boom, you're acting out your vision. I think that's really a great proof of our connection to that which is bigger than ourselves.
I'm going to tell you something really funny. And I've done so many shows. I can feel the cycles, right? Mm-hmm. I feel the cycles of content. And it's a really good example of what we're talking about here, because I would say, not from me, from the guest, over the last 10 shows, over the last 2 or 3 weeks, and the audience will tell you, I've had nearly every guest bring up Joseph Campbell.
Really?
Yeah, and not me. No, you did it tonight. I didn't bring up Joseph.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I did.
Happened last night. Happened the night before. Happened every day last week. A couple of weeks ago, I was hanging out with one of my best friends, and we're in his living room, and I make this joke. He goes, and he's listening right now. So he knows that this is a fact. This is not made up. We're sitting in his living room, and he's got a nice house. It's cool, right? It's all awake. It's all consciousness. He's got the Indian tapestries, and he's got the incense burning, and it's all good, man. It's awesome. He goes, "What do you think?" I said, "It's pretty good, man. It's like Joseph Campbell." And he goes, "Who?" And I go, what do you mean, who? And he goes, "Who's Joseph Campbell?" I go, "Dude, are you fake?" Right? I said, "Is all of this an illusion? What do you mean you don't know who Joseph Campbell is? You can't be enlightened. You can't be all consciousness. You can't be all connected and not know who Joseph Campbell is." I said, "You're fake." Right? I mean, we were just joking back and forth. But that statement, that little back and forth and I'm just kidding and things. But it was just a funny statement to make. And then over the last 2 weeks, that's the universe, right? That's the connected consciousness. I make this joke with my friend and expose him to Joseph Campbell. And for some reason, over the last couple of weeks, each guest has brought up Joseph Campbell.
Yeah.
That's not coincidence.
No, Jung called it synchronicity, and he said there was something much, much bigger involved in behind that. Yeah. Oh, that's a great story.
It's a true story. I'm gonna get a text. I'm gonna get a text in a minute, dude. Stop talking about that. But it's really strange, and to have that happen, and we need to more. I wish the whole world would stop and recognize the synchronicity when it happens. I love it, man.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's funny because Carl Jung, who wrote a whole book about synchronicity, also wrote a book about the whole idea of UFOs being archetypes and stuff. That doesn't mean they're not real, but they are archetypes of our own unconscious, and which makes me wonder. We started with UFOs, we might as well finish with them too. When you start talking about seeing UFOs or experiencing UFOs, we're one with those folks, just like we're one with each other. We're in the same universe together, and they may be different, have different kinds of bodies and different ways of doing things, and understand the world under different things. But in effect, if we're all powered by consciousness, we are all one, even with those aliens.
Fantastic conversation tonight, Jim, and have fun watching the UFO hearing.
I will. I had so much fun watching the highlights. I'm going to watch the whole thing tomorrow.
It's good. It's a mind-blowing thing, and that's where we are today. Be safe out there. Be safe out there in the woods, and I look forward to our next conversation. It's going to be a good one. Thank you so much. Have a good night. Perfect conversation, a perfect way to wrap up the show. And it's certainly a perfect way to wrap up a week and a very historic day here, not only for our community, but the rest of the world. It was just an amazing day. I want everybody to have a great, safe, fun, and amazing weekend. And I've got to continue to work. Sleep is for sissies. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Thank you to Dennis and Kevin. Webmasters, Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy. SpaceboyMusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. And this broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2023 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black of the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Everybody have a great, safe, fun, amazing weekend. I'll see you on Monday. Go Backley Tappy.